Hiring. It's the gateway to opportunity, the moment where careers can be made or, let's be honest, seriously dented. For companies, it's about finding the right talent, the mythical unicorn that will propel them to greatness. But for applicants, it's often a nerve-wracking dance, a display of skills, and a plea for fair consideration. Now imagine this already delicate process being tainted by practices that are, frankly, a bit dodgy. We're talking about those little habits in HR departments that seem harmless, but actually undermine the entire concept of fairness. Ethical hiring isn't just a buzzword for a corporate social responsibility brochure. It's the fundamental bedrock upon which a company's integrity and ultimately, its success are built. It's about creating a level playing field, ensuring that every candidate is judged on merit, not on outdated, discriminatory, or just plain lazy metrics. Think about it. When a company decides to bring someone new into its fold, it's making a statement. It's saying, we believe in this person, their skills, and what they can bring to our team. This isn't just a transaction, it's the beginning of a relationship. And like any good relationship, it needs to start with trust and respect. If the very first steps of that relationship involve questionable tactics, what does that say about the company? It screams, we might not be the most principled folks around. And in a world where company culture and employee satisfaction are paramount, starting off on the wrong foot can have long-lasting detrimental effects. Good people want to work for good companies, and good companies don't play dirty. The significance of ethical hiring practices extends far beyond individual job offers. It shapes the reputation of an organization, influences its ability to attract top-tier talent, and even impacts employee morale and retention. When employees know that the hiring process was fair and transparent, they are more likely to feel valued and respected from day one. This fosters a sense of loyalty and commitment. Conversely, if whispers of unfair practices circulate, it can create a toxic environment, breeding resentment and distrust, not just among new hires but also within the existing workforce. It's a ripple effect, and not the good kind, more like the kind you get when you drop a bowling ball in a kiddie pool. Therefore, scrutinizing every aspect of the recruitment cycle, from the job advertisement to the final offer, is not just an HR department's responsibility, it's a strategic imperative for the entire organization. Companies that champion ethical hiring are not just doing the right thing, they are investing in their future, building a stronger, more diverse, and more innovative workforce. They understand that true talent isn't confined by previous pay grades or demographic boxes. They understand that fairness is not a constraint, but a catalyst for excellence. Let's be clear. Getting this right is not optional, it's essential. Especially when we start talking about things like, demanding to see someone's old payslips. Now let's dive into the murky waters of a particularly questionable practice, demanding a job applicant's previous payslips. Yes, you heard that right. Some companies, bless their cotton socks, think it's perfectly acceptable to ask for this highly personal and frankly often irrelevant piece of paper. Mr. Ijuan Sunodo, a CEO in the oil and gas sector who clearly has his head screwed on straight, has publicly slammed this practice. He calls it unethical, potentially illegal, and a hallmark of low-quality organizations. And you know what? He's absolutely spot on. It's like asking for someone's diary before you decide if you want to be friends with them. It's invasive, unnecessary, and sets a terrible precedent for the employer-employee relationship. The core ethical dilemma here is that a payslip is a snapshot of a past agreement between a different employer and the candidate under entirely different circumstances. It reflects what they paid, not necessarily what they are in a new role at a new company, with potentially new responsibilities and a different market rate. Insisting on seeing this document effectively allows the new employer to anchor their salary offer not on the candidate's skills, experience, or the value they can bring to the specific role in question, but on a number plucked from their past. This is lazy recruitment at its finest, or rather, its worst. It's a shortcut that bypasses the actual work of fairly assessing a candidate's current market value and their potential contribution. Furthermore, this practice puts undue pressure on the applicant. Job hunting is already stressful enough without feeling like your entire financial history is up for audit by a prospective employer who hasn't even offered you a job yet. It can make candidates feel like they are being judged on their past earnings rather than their future potential. It creates an imbalanced power dynamic right from the outset, where the employer holds all the cards, including highly sensitive personal information that they haven't earned the right to see. This isn't negotiation, It's an interrogation based on information that should be confidential and frankly none of their business at that stage of the game. Mr. Tsunoda highlighted that this is often an open secret, an olden days practice still clinging on in some organizations. He rightly questions how employees can be expected to uphold ethical standards if the HR department itself engages in what many consider to be unethical behavior. It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do. If the gatekeepers of company culture and policy are cutting ethical corners, what message does that send to everyone else? It suggests that perhaps rules are more like guidelines and integrity is flexible. That's not a foundation for a strong, ethical workplace. It's a recipe for problems down the line. Beyond the straightforward ethical concerns, demanding payslips in Malaysia might actually land companies in a bit of hot water, legally speaking. It's not just about being nice, it's about complying with the law. Mr. Ikhwan Sunodo pointed out that sharing payslips with a third party, like a prospective employer, could potentially breach Malaysia's Personal Data Protection Act 2010, PDPA. Now the PDPA is there for a reason, to protect individuals' personal information from being misused or disclosed without their proper consent and for a legitimate purpose. A payslip, laden with details like your name, employee ID, salary, deductions, EPF, SOXO, and bank account information, is chock full of personal data. The PDPA sets out principles for the collection, use, and disclosure of personal data. One key principle is that data should only be processed if it is necessary for a lawful purpose directly related to an activity of the data user. Is knowing someone's exact previous salary, down to the last sen, truly to assess their suitability for a new different role? Or is it just a convenient, albeit problematic way to set a lowball offer? Many would argue the latter. The necessity here is highly debatable, and if it's not strictly necessary, then collecting it under duress. Because let's face it, if a company demands it, applicants feel they have no choice, could be seen as a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the PDPA. Consider the consent aspect. While an applicant might agree to provide their payslip, is that consent truly freely given when their chance of getting a job hangs in the balance? The PDPA emphasizes informed and unambiguous consent. If an applicant isn't fully aware of why this specific data is being collected, how it will be used, and if they feel pressured into providing it, the validity of that consent could be challenged. Furthermore, the PDPA requires data users, the potential employers, to ensure the security of the personal data they collect. How many HR departments have robust systems in place to protect these highly sensitive payslips, especially from unsuccessful candidates? It's a data breach waiting to happen. The implications of a PDPA breach aren't trivial. Fines can be hefty, and the reputational damage can be significant. If a company is found to be systematically flouting data privacy principles in its hiring process, it doesn't just look bad, it demonstrates a disregard for legal obligations. This isn't just about payslips. It's about a broader culture of respect for personal information. Companies need to ask themselves if the perceived benefit of knowing a past salary outweighs the potential legal risks and the clear ethical downsides. In most enlightened assessments, the answer should be a resounding no. It's time to move beyond practices that flirt with illegality and embrace true fairness. The legal tightrope doesn't just involve data privacy laws like the PDPA, it also extends into the realm of contract law. As Mr. Ikhwan Sunoto astutely observed, employment contracts and by extension documents directly related to employment like payslips are legally binding agreements between an employee and their or employer. These documents often contain confidential information, including salary details, which are part of that private contractual arrangement. Sharing such a document with a third party, like a prospective new employer, without the explicit consent of the original employer, the one who issued the payslip, could potentially constitute a breach of contract or a breach of confidentiality obligations. Think about it. Your employment contract likely has clauses about confidentiality, covering company information, and sometimes even the terms of your employment. While your salary isn't a state secret in the grand scheme of things, the specifics detailed on a payslip, including allowances, deductions, and employer contributions, are part of a confidential agreement. Your current employer might not be thrilled to know that their internal compensation structures are being freely circulated to competitors or other companies in the market. They have a legitimate interest in keeping that information within the confines of their own organization and their direct employment relationships. When a prospective employer demands a payslip, they are essentially asking the candidate to potentially violate the terms of their existing or past employment agreement. This puts the candidate in an incredibly awkward and unfair position. Do they risk angering their current or former employer by sharing confidential documents, or do they risk losing out on a new job opportunity by refusing? It's a no-win situation created entirely by the demanding company. An ethical employer would never put a candidate in such a compromising position, forcing them to choose between their contractual obligations and their career progression. It's a sign of disrespect for both the candidate and their previous employer. This practice also raises questions about the recruiting company's own respect for contractual obligations. If they are willing to encourage a candidate to potentially breach one contract, what does that say about how they view their own future contracts with that employee? It's a subtle but significant indicator of a company's ethical compass. True professionalism in recruitment involves respecting existing legal and contractual frameworks, not trying to find ways around them for a perceived informational advantage. The focus should be on what the candidate can do for the new company, not on prying into the confidential details of their past employment relationship without proper consent from all relevant parties. Section 5. The Vicious Cycle. How demanding payslips fuels wage inequality. One of the most damaging consequences of the payslip demand is its undeniable role in perpetuating wage inequality. It's a practice that systematically disadvantages those who have been historically underpaid, trapping them in a cycle of lower earnings regardless of their skills, experience, or the value they could bring to a new role. When a new salary offer is anchored to a previous, potentially unfair salary, it bakes in past discrimination or undervaluation. This is particularly detrimental for women, minorities, or anyone who, for various reasons, might have accepted a lower salary in a previous job, perhaps due to lack of negotiation experience, urgent need for employment, or discriminatory practices at their former workplace. Imagine someone who was significantly underpaid in their last role. They've since gained more experience, acquired new skills, and are now applying for a position where they are genuinely worth much more. If the new employer bases their offer on the old payslip, they are essentially importing the previous employer's undervaluation. The candidate's true market worth, their capabilities, and the responsibilities of the new role become secondary to a number on an old piece of paper. This isn't just unfair, it's economically inefficient. Companies miss out on fairly compensating and thus potentially attracting and retaining talent that could significantly contribute to their success, all because they are tethered to an outdated and irrelevant salary figure. This practice creates a salary history trap. It means that a lower starting salary early in one's career can have a compounding negative effect over an entire lifetime of work. Each subsequent job, if reliant on past payslips, will only offer incremental increases, ensuring that the individual never quite catches up to their peers, who might have started with a more equitable salary. Mr. Ijuan Sunoto rightly pointed this out when he argued that compensation should be based on what an applicant is worth to the organization, not what they were paid by the one. It's about future value, not historical discounting. Moreover, the focus on payslips can subtly discourage employers from doing their own homework on appropriate compensation. Instead of researching industry benchmarks, defining clear salary bands for roles based on responsibilities and required competencies, and assessing each candidate's unique skills and experience against these criteria, they take the easy way out. This reliance on past salary data as a primary determinant for future pay is a lazy approach to compensation strategy. It absolves the company of the responsibility to establish fair and equitable pay structures internally, instead allowing external, often arbitrary historical data to dictate their offers, thereby contributing to systemic wage gaps across industries. Section 6. Case Study, Maria's Story, the Underpaid Achiever, and the Salary Ceiling. Let's consider a hypothetical but all too real scenario to illustrate how this payslip nonsense plays out. Meet Maria, a highly skilled software developer. Early in her career, fresh out of university and eager to gain experience, Maria accepted a role at a small startup that, frankly, underpaid her. She knew it, but she was passionate about the project and saw it as a stepping stone. For 3 years, she excelled, consistently exceeding expectations, leading projects, and mentoring junior developers. Her responsibilities grew exponentially, but her salary only saw token increases. The startup pleaded tight budgets, and Maria, focused on her work, didn't push hard enough. Eventually, Maria decides it's time to move on. She applies for a senior developer position at a larger, well-established tech company. She aces the technical interviews, impresses the hiring manager with her portfolio, and her references are glowing. The role is a significant step up, with greater responsibilities and requiring a higher level of expertise, all of which Maria clearly possesses. The company has a salary band for this role, say RM 8,000 to RM 10,000, based on market rates and internal equity. Maria, based on her skills and the role's demands, objectively fits comfortably within this band, likely towards the higher end. Then comes the dreaded request. Could you please provide your last 3 months' payslips? Maria's last drawn salary, due to her previous underpayment, was RM 5,500. Reluctantly, she provides the payslips. The HR department, armed with this information, decides to offer her RM 6,500. It's an increase from her previous role, yes, but it's significantly below what the role is actually worth and what other candidates with similar skills but a higher salary history might be offered. They justify it by saying it's a good jump from her last salary. Maria is now faced with a dilemma. Accept a lowball offer that doesn't reflect her true value, or walk away from an opportunity she was otherwise excited about. This is the wage inequality machine in action. This scenario, or versions of it, plays out countless times. The payslip becomes an artificial ceiling, preventing talented individuals like Maria from achieving fair compensation aligned with their current abilities and the market value of the job they are applying for. The company, in this case, might save some money in the short term, but they risk hiring a demotivated employee who knows she's undervalued, or they might lose out on her talent altogether if she decides to hold out for a fairer offer elsewhere. It also perpetuates the myth that if someone was paid less before, they must somehow be worth less now, a deeply flawed and discriminatory assumption. Section 7. Beyond the numbers, focusing on true value, skills, and potential. If companies are serious about attracting the best talent and fostering an equitable workplace, they need to shift their focus dramatically, away from the crutch of past payslips and towards a genuine assessment of a candidate's true value, skills, and potential. This means doing the actual work of recruitment, understanding the demands of the role, defining the competencies required for success, and evaluating how well each candidate measures up against these objective criteria. It's about looking forward to what an individual can contribute, not backward at what another company decided to pay them under different circumstances. The first step is to establish clear, well-researched salary bands for every position before the recruitment process even begins. These bands should be based on objective factors such as industry benchmarks, the level of responsibility, required experience, necessary skills, and the company's own compensation philosophy. When salary ranges are transparently determined and consistently applied, the need to peek at a candidate's past earnings becomes entirely redundant. The conversation can then revolve around where the candidate fits within that predefined range based on their specific qualifications and interview performance, not on their previous salary history. This creates a much fairer and more objective negotiation process. Furthermore, a robust evaluation process should include diverse assessment methods. This could involve technical tests, case studies, presentations, competency-based interviews, and behavioral assessments. These tools are designed to gauge a candidate's actual abilities, problem-solving skills, cultural fit, and potential for growth within the organization. When you have solid data from these types of evaluations, a past payslip pales in comparison as an indicator of future success. It's about investing the time and resources to truly understand what each candidate brings to the table, rather than relying on a simplistic and often misleading numerical shortcut. Mr. Iquan call for ethical HR practices underscores this very point. Ethical hiring starts with ethical HR practices. This means training recruiters and hiring managers to avoid biases, to focus on job-related criteria, and to understand the importance of pay equity. It means fostering a culture where asking for a payslip is seen not as due diligence, but as an outdated and unfair practice. Companies that successfully make this shift don't just improve their hiring outcomes, they build a reputation as an employer of choice, one that values talent for what it truly is, not for what it was previously paid. Section 8. Practical steps towards fairer hiring, a blueprint for progressive companies. So how can companies actually ditch the payslip habit and move towards more transparent and fair hiring practices? It's not rocket science, but it does require commitment and a willingness to change old habits. A clear first step is to explicitly ban the practice of asking for salary history or previous payslips from job applicants. This should be a firm policy, communicated clearly to all hiring managers, recruiters, and any third-party agencies working on the company's behalf. Make it non-negotiable. This simple act sends a powerful message about the company's commitment to fair evaluation and pay equity. Secondly, as mentioned before, invest in developing and publishing salary ranges for open positions wherever feasible. When candidates know the potential salary range up front, it allows them to self-select based on their expectations and saves everyone time. It also shifts the conversation from "what did you used to make?" to "here's what this role pays based on its value to our organization. Let's discuss how your skills and experience align with that." This transparency empowers candidates and ensures that compensation discussions are grounded in the current job's worth, not historical anchors. It fosters trust and sets a professional tone from the outset. Thirdly, train hiring teams thoroughly on competency-based interviewing techniques and unconscious bias mitigation. Equip them with the skills to assess candidates based on objective criteria directly related to the job requirements. This includes understanding how to evaluate skills, experience, and potential without resorting to proxies like past salary. Role-playing exercises, standardized scoring rubrics, and diverse interview panels can all contribute to a more objective and equitable assessment process. The goal is to ensure that every candidate is evaluated on a level playing field, based on their ability to perform the job effectively. Finally, conduct regular pay equity audits. Once you've hired someone based on their skills and the value they bring, ensure your internal pay structures are fair and non-discriminatory. This means periodically reviewing salaries across similar roles and experience levels to identify and rectify any unexplained pay gaps. This ongoing commitment to internal equity reinforces the fairness of the hiring process and helps to retain talent. By taking these practical steps, companies can move beyond the ethically dubious practice of demanding payslips and build a recruitment system that is truly fair, transparent, and focused on attracting the very best talent for the right reasons. Section 9. Conclusion. Building a future of ethical recruitment, one hire at a time. The controversy surrounding the demand for payslips during job applications isn't just a minor HR quibble. It's a spotlight on the critical need for ethical practices in the very foundation of an organization, its people. Asking for a payslip, as we've seen, is not only ethically questionable, potentially creating an imbalanced power dynamic and invading privacy, but it can also tiptoe into legally dubious territory, particularly under Malaysian law concerning data privacy and contractual confidentiality. It's a practice that, as Mr. Ikhwan Sunoto so clearly articulated, reflects poorly on an organization and often signals a low-quality approach to talent acquisition. More profoundly, this outdated habit directly perpetuates wage inequality. By anchoring new salaries to past earnings, companies inadvertently carry forward any historical underpayment or discrimination a candidate may have faced. This traps individuals, particularly those from historically disadvantaged groups, in a cycle of lower pay, regardless of their evolving skills, experience, or the true market value of the role they are seeking. It's a systemic issue that requires a conscious and deliberate shift in mindset and practice from employers who genuinely care about fairness and equity, moving beyond the lazy reliance on a number that tells an incomplete and often misleading story. The path forward involves embracing transparency, objectivity, and a focus on inherent value. Companies must invest in defining clear salary bands based on role value and market rates, train their hiring teams in competency-based assessments, and foster a culture where a candidate's worth is judged by their potential contribution, not their previous paycheck. The emphasis must be on what a candidate can do for the company, not what another company decided they were worth. This isn't just about being nice. It's about smart business, attracting the best talent, and building a motivated, engaged, and fairly compensated workforce. Ultimately, the call to abandon the practice of requesting payslips is a call for HR departments and company leaders to step up and champion true ethical recruitment. It's about recognizing that the way a company hires is a direct reflection of its values. By adopting fairer, more transparent, and legally sound hiring practices, organizations can not only avoid the pitfalls of the Payslip controversy, but also build stronger, more equitable workplaces where talent can truly thrive. The future of recruitment must be built on respect, fairness, and an unwavering commitment to judging individuals on their merit, not their salary history. It's time to close the curtain on the Payslip Peep Show for good.